Hey, Junior Devs, welcome to the Monday live stream. Glad to see you here. If you're here and you'd like to chat live, go ahead and jump in the chat and say hello. And if you have any questions as we go along, I'll try to keep my eyes down there on the chat as well. And feel free to ask any questions. If you would, put like a question mark in front of your question so I can hopefully see that in case there's other conversations going on as well. But today we're going to be jumping into maybe less of a fun topic than others, maybe less encouraging than others perhaps are that we've done in the past so far. Again, my name is Dave Welch, Dev Mentor Dave here at the Dev Mentor Dave YouTube channel, and I'm glad to have you here. Hopefully, this doesn't just seem like clickbait today, but we are going to be talking about something that is going to be fairly negative, and I don't want you to feel like I'm trying to keep you from becoming a developer or in any way try to discourage you as a junior developer. Actually, my goal with this is to help encourage you, is to help you know going into this what to expect. Because the reality is, becoming a developer, there's a lot of great things about becoming a developer. I love development. I love working in software development. I'm on the web side of things. So web application development, it's very fun. There's lots and lots of stuff that you can learn, many avenues you can go down. Um, but it does have its drawbacks as well. And any job, any career is going to have drawbacks. But it's important that you know ahead of time some of the things that you're probably going to run into, that I call the dark side of a software career. So again, lots of great stuff. I would still encourage anyone to jump into this career. I think it's an awesome career. I think there's lots of people. We need more developers. There's plenty of work out there right now, even though, the marketplace may not seem like it at times, especially for junior developers. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit tonight as well. But this is still a great career path if it's something that you're interested in. So please do not let anything that I say tonight dissuade you from pursuing this as a career. As we go through each of these kind of main sections, I'm gonna have some feedback to help you not just know what kind of the pitfalls are, but know what are some steps that you can take to actually, by knowing in advance, be able to do something about it, to be able to prepare for these different situations. So hopefully this will not just be a downer video, but it'll be an encouragement, and you'll be able to take some of the information that I have and the ideas that I have and implement them into your plan and your process, and hopefully it'll be helpful to you to help you navigate this career, because I think there's a lot of positives to being a software developer. So again, please don't let the negative side of things this evening turn you off from it. Every career has negative aspects, and this one does as well. So let's jump in. As I remember as a kid, we'll take the experience from GI Joe. Knowing is half the battle, right? So if you know what to expect, you can use that information to your advantage. And so that's really our goal tonight. It's not just to sit here and complain. It's not just to sit here and even badmouth any companies or any processes or procedures, but we're just going to be honest about where things stand and about my experiences as a developer and others that I've talked to, both senior developers that I've worked with and other junior developers that I've helped mentor and different things like that. So again, this is all from my perspective and experience and information I've gathered from others. Your experience may be different, and there was even some varying degrees of experiences in different aspects with some of my own friends and coworkers and former coworkers, and so it's take everything that I say and run that through the filter of your experience as well, because hopefully some of these things may not be as bad as they've been for me and others, and you might be in a better situation than we are. But hopefully, this will give you a good idea of what is out there and what's going on in this industry and in this career, and some things to watch out for and be prepared for, because there's a high probability you're going to run into one or more of these issues in your software development career. So again, as always, as we go through these, if you're watching live, certainly feel free to leave a chat and a comment or a question, and I'd be happy to take a look at those. I'm keeping an eye on it down here. If you're watching this after it's gone live and after it's been posted, certainly feel free to leave a comment in the comment section, and I'll go through and I'll read those and either answer those on the next live stream or maybe create another video to kind of help you out with that. Just in case you haven't noticed, we do have one video finally up that's not a live stream. It took a while to get there, and I've got several others more in the hopper, so to speak. But we do have one that is live, and that's talking about how we deal with stress. Because as one of the things we'll talk about is stress in this job. And so hopefully that'll be a help to you. If you just search the channel, there's very few videos, so you can find it. It's one of 2 video uploads. So hopefully that's an encouragement to you as well. And again, if you're watching this and you find this content helpful to you, please click the like button. It helps us hopefully get some more viewers and be able to help other junior developers in their career process. As I always say, my goal is to help junior developers bridge the gap between learning to code and launching a career. This is not a tutorial website. I'm not going to sit here and teach you how to write code. There's lots of places that you can learn that. But I want to help you kind of bridge that gap, because there is a gap. And part of that gap is this lack of knowledge of really understanding what it's really like in the software industry, in the software career. And so that's what we're going to look at tonight. Let's jump over to our handy dandy screen here. So we're going to be looking at the dark side of a software career, kind of like the dark side of a moon. A moon is a very good thing, right? The moon gives us light as it's reflected from the sun, and gives us light at night, and so that's very helpful. But there is a dark side, and it's very cold on the dark side of the moon, from what I understand. Of course, again, not a scientist, but that's my understanding, since there's no sun hitting it. And so there is a dark side to every job. There's a dark side to even the software career. So we're gonna jump into several of those dark sides and kind of look at different points and issues in each of those, and then we'll discuss where do we go from there. So the first thing we'll look at is this struggle of becoming a junior developer. Now, many of you probably have already gone through this process, but I know there's probably some watching this video that you have just started, maybe even looking into becoming a developer, and you haven't really started down the process. Maybe you've watched a couple of tutorials or something like that, and you're interested in walking down this path. It's good to understand that even just taking those first few steps can be very hard, and it's not because the steps themselves are hard. It's just because it's an interesting and involved process to become a developer. Again, this is something that I would highly encourage you to do. It's a well-paying career. There's lots of different avenues of growth and directions that you can go in it, but it's definitely something that that is difficult. And so we're going to talk through that here this evening. So becoming a junior dev is hard for several reasons. One is that there's so many options when it comes to development. We have a lot of different things that you can do as a developer, and I'm just talking strictly from a web application developer. We have websites. You could go like a WordPress route. You could go working for a company that I've got a friend who works for a company who basically builds HTML forms all the time. Like, that's basically most of his job is building HTML forms. You've got all different kinds of front-end frameworks and languages, and back-end frameworks and languages, and all these different options to choose from. especially if you have no idea really what you want to do. It can be really hard to decide what path to take. In fact, the problem is most of the training kind of focuses on one or two core areas, which is more of a front end dev type of career. But there's lots of other things out there. There's back end devs. There's other parts of the industry like DevOps, dev operations, design, project management. I mean, there's so much that goes into good software development that even as a developer, it's good to have those developer skills for some of those other jobs as well. And so it can be really hard to know where to go, and a lot of times everybody's kind of funneling new people into the same funnel, and that doesn't really meet all the different various needs that are out there. Um, and so that can be a bit of a problem. So there's lots of options without really a lot of good direction as far as how do I choose what I'm most interested in. I was talking to a friend of mine a few days ago, actually a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about how he was thinking about getting into software development, and was kind of asking me questions, and of course I directed him to Dev Mentor Dave, the YouTube channel. But he was asking questions kind of about where to start, and just through some of the questions that I asked him, I found that he really he's not big on like design and graphics and things like that. Doesn't want to really necessarily build websites. He likes the idea of solving problems and building something that does something, right? A program really is what he's interested in. And so for him, something that's more of like a back end developer job is probably going to fit him much better than going through the current traditional route of a boot camp. But unfortunately, he may not even, outside of talking to me, he may never have even come up with that option, because everything that's marketed, and everything that's trying to pull you into their system is mostly these front end boot camps where you learn HTML and CSS and JavaScript and various uses with JavaScript, and maybe you'll use a back-end version of JavaScript called Node, but sometimes not even that. And then you'll learn a JavaScript framework, and it's all very front-end heavy. And that really would not probably be a good fit for him, but that's mostly what is marketed out there. So there's a lot of options, but not all of them are marketed well, and not all of them are easily accessible unless you know that you want to get involved in that. So that's why part of becoming a junior developer is hard, is knowing out of all those options, what is the best thing for you, and what do you really want to do? So not only are there so many options, but there are a lot of requirements. There are a lot of requirements. And really this comes down to not prerequisites where, like you go to college and you have to have this class and this class and this class before you can take the real college courses. That's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about if you're going to be successful in being a junior dev, there's a lot of things that you have to learn along the way. Again, if you just go through a standard boot camp, you're going to have to learn HTML, which is a markup language. You're going to have to learn CSS, which is a styling language. You're going to have to learn JavaScript, which is an actual programming language. You're going to have to learn different ways to program in JavaScript, at least one framework. You're going to have to learn just all kinds of different things that you may not really want to. Whereas if you go the route of just being a backend developer, you can probably just focus on one main language, maybe a little bit of development ops, and something like that, where you might have to learn a little bit fewer things, but there's still a lot of things you have to learn. You have to learn to think like a developer. You have to learn to understand how to take a problem and find a solution and make that solution um, based off of how you code, right? So you gotta learn not just the how to write code, but how to use that code in a way that's going to solve a problem, fix this problem for somebody, create a solution. So there's a lot of requirements when you're jumping into this world of development that are not always made very clear. In fact, in marketing, they talk about how fast and easy it is for you to become a developer, right? You'll learn all these things in 3 months or 5 months or 6 months or whatever the marketing is. Just 8 hours a week or whatever these things are that they throw out there. They don't get into the nitty gritty, and there's a lot of stuff that you really have to know, and you have to know it pretty well to be successful as a developer. So just becoming a junior developer is not necessarily that easy. And the next thing is that it takes a lot of time. Again, we kind of talked about here. There's this marketing idea that in 6 months you can be job ready. I don't want to say that's a lie, because that means that they're intentionally deceiving people, but I've met very, very few junior developers who actually were job ready after a 6 month program. There is just so many requirements, so many things that you have to learn. It just takes time. It takes a lot of time. It takes time in a classroom setting or in a training setting of some sort, whether that's tutorials or whether that's a boot camp or some sort of specific training, like a centric type training or something like that. It takes time there, but it also takes a lot of time outside of the classroom, because you've got to practice. You can't just go to the game and play basketball or play baseball or whatever it is. You've got to go to practice. You've got to learn skills and hone skills, and that's how you get better, right? And that's how you become a successful dev. Again, the goal here is to take you from learning the code to launching a successful career. We want to get you moving in the right direction. So becoming a junior dev is very difficult. Looks like I'm buffering here. I apologize for that. Give me just 1 second. Okay. Hopefully that'll clear up. I think there might be family members playing with the internet. Okay. So it takes a lot of time to become a junior developer. So the question is, what can we do? Right? What can we really do? Since it takes a lot of time, what are the steps? We know these are problems. What are the steps that we can take to move forward and make this beneficial for us? The first thing that I would suggest is prioritize your time and your cost. So knowing that there's going to be a lot of time that's taken up, and knowing that training is not cheap. If you go to a boot camp, you're going to be spending thousands of dollars for somebody to teach you these things. There are lots of free tutorials on YouTube that are very good. There's some Udemy courses and things like that that'll be a lot cheaper than taking like a boot camp course, or especially going to college for it. But you need to kind of prioritize what's important to you. Are you looking for something that's low cost? It's probably going to take you more time to do that, especially if you don't have anybody really giving you good direction on the process there. If you're willing to pay more for the education, then you can go a different route, like a boot camp or something like that, and that will give you a faster start to your learning process. So depending on your goals and your priorities and your time frame, and your willingness to spend money or go into debt, hopefully not, then that's going to be the first step, is figure out what your priorities are, so that when I'm jumping into this process of becoming a junior dev, there's going to be time, there's going to be money There's going to be a lot of things that I have to learn. I'm going to have to put in a lot of work here. So you're going to have to create a priority, not just with your time and money, but with your life as a whole. Plan out when you're going to spend time training, when you're going to spend time practicing. All of these things are important. The next thing I would do is, especially if you're just looking into becoming a junior developer, I would start very simple. I would go online and find some basic tutorials. You'll find there's a guy that I typically send people to called Traversy Media. I'll try to remember to put a link to that later on in the video. But Traversy Media is a great place for tutorials for beginner HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP. He's got other stuff on there that he does a really good job of walking beginners through the process there. So, but I would start with something simple like that and just see if you actually like it. See if you enjoy doing any of that stuff. And if you don't, maybe this isn't really for you. Are there some devs that will do development work just because it pays well and they don't really like it? Sure. I wouldn't usually suggest that. But if you do find that you like it, then I would, in my opinion, I would go as cheap as possible, maybe a Udemy course or a low cost, maybe shorter boot camp. But I would encourage you to try to learn as much as you can for free and then jump into something like a boot camp or something like that, because that is going to just reinforce the things that you have learned. I feel like, in my experience, a lot of devs who go through boot camps, they're hearing everything for the first time when they go through the boot camp. And so everything is brand new and everything is confusing and it doesn't all fit together very well the first time you hear it. But I've actually talked to other junior devs who have told me, I wish I could go back. Now that I've been through boot camp, I could go back and take the boot camp again because I would understand more of what I was learning. I would be able to apply it and maybe remember it better. So I would always encourage you to learn as much as you can. Take some free courses on YouTube through some of these people like Traversy Media or others that are out there, and take some Udemy courses to learn some of these things. Do that first, and then maybe spend the money on a boot camp. Because that you're gonna have a base understanding then, and everything that they're teaching you in the boot camp is gonna make a whole lot more sense. And then of course, if you have the time and the money, go take as many of those things as you can to where you feel comfortable and you can walk out of that class and feel like you actually know how to put together a program, how to put together a website or whatever it is that you're wanting to do for your career. All right, so becoming a junior dev is hard. Unfortunately, it's just a reality, but it's very rewarding, and you can do it if you just make a plan of how you're going to get through that process and then follow that plan. All right, so not only is becoming a junior developer hard, but getting a junior dev job is hard as well. And some of you already know this because you've maybe gone through boot camp or you've gone through some other training and you're in the job market right now and you're trying to figure out how, why is it so hard for me to get a job? It seems like every day I'm seeing, junior developers online talking about, I've had, 10 interviews, I've had 30 interviews, I've had 100 interviews, and I've not been hired yet. And there's a lot of great people online and like LinkedIn and things like that who are doing a great job of helping people try to move their career forward even before they get into that job. But the reality is that getting a junior dev job is just hard. It's not as simple as you graduated from boot camp and now there's a billion companies that want to hire you. That's just not how it really works. And what we really want is not just any job. We want a good job. We want a job that's going to give you a good wage for you. Whether if you're single, maybe you can take a little bit less than somebody who's got a family that they need to support. A good wage. You want a job where the company's going to help you grow in your skill set. You want a job where hopefully they provide some sort of mentoring. to help you to help you grow in the process as a junior developer up into I don't know what we call an intermediate developer. I don't just a dev. I don't know to a senior developer. I don't know if we have good terminology for that process. But the reality is that getting a job as a junior dev is difficult. And the first reason why that is because a lot of companies just don't hire junior devs. And that's the case of the company that I work for. The company I work for has a policy that we don't hire junior developers, and we'll kind of get into that why here in a little bit. But they just don't. That's just their policy. So for some, it could be that they just have really strict deadlines and they just don't have the time and to be able to bring somebody who's a junior developer along to get into the workflow and be able to be productive on the projects. Sometimes there's like a specific quality standard that you're not going to get from a junior developer right out of the gate coming from a boot camp. They need to have a good amount of time programming and programming to standards and specifically the standards of the company. So that's a reason why some companies just don't even hire junior developers. Another reason is they may not have senior developers who are interested in or able to be a mentor to a junior dev. Maybe they're willing to hire junior devs, but there's just nobody there to really bring them along and help them become a better developer, so that it just doesn't really work for their process. Maybe they've even tried. Maybe they even tried hiring developers, junior developers, and it just didn't work out. And so they're like, we're not doing that anymore. And so there's lots of reasons why companies may not hire junior devs, but that does take a significant portion of the development community out, right? So that's a lot of companies that potentially could have been hiring a developer who's a junior developer, but they're just completely not available. The second reason is that a lot of employers, or most employers probably, are looking for the best bang for their buck. And this is not a bad thing. Again, I want to be careful to not put all of these things in a bad light. Obviously, we're calling this the dark side of the dev career, but the reality is companies have profit margins, right? They've got to be able to get the best bang for their buck when it comes to hiring developers, and generally you're going to get the best bang for your buck with a senior developer, because junior developers take a lot of time, right? So they want the most productivity for the least amount of pay. So that's why certain junior developers are able to get jobs before other junior developers. They're able to maybe show that they have some skills or they have some experience that is better than most of the market out there for junior developers. And so that's why one may get a job at a company and another one may not, even though they went to the same boot camp. So employers are looking for the most that they can get for the least amount of money. And let's just be honest, junior developers are the cheapest developers because they have no experience, right? They're also looking for high and varied experience, right? So a lot of experience and varied experience. We want you to have lots of experience, but we want you to have experience in lots of different things. And that's, again, one of the reasons why boot camps try to cover so much in a short period of time, is because companies need developers who have experience in all kinds of things. The company that I work for currently prefers full stack developers, and that's somebody who can work on the front end, somebody who can work on the back end, comfortable in multiple languages. That's what we look for. So a junior developer obviously is not going to have all of those skills, but the more you have, the more likely you are to be picked up by an employer, because they're looking for the best bang for their dollar, and junior devs are not a lot of bang for the buck initially, because there just isn't a lot of experience there. Thirdly, most employers just simply are not ready for junior devs. And again, this sounds harsh, but the reality is that there are a lot of employers out there who hire junior devs that probably shouldn't be hiring junior devs. They really don't know how to interview junior devs. You see this there when there's a lot of turnover in a company with junior developers. It's because a lot of it's because the company that's hiring them probably doesn't really know how to evaluate a junior developer and whether or not that junior developer is going to fit with their culture, going to fit with what they're trying to do from a code standpoint. There's just a lot of different things that you have to think about when you're hiring a junior developer. That's why you see a lot of, especially junior developer job roles requiring like code tests and things like that, because it's hard to know exactly how to find a junior developer that's going to fit in to probably a mostly senior developer company. So a lot of companies they just don't know how to interview junior devs. So they're just not ready. They're not really ready for junior devs. Another piece of that is that they don't have a plan for integration, right? They're just looking for cheap labor. There's no plan to get you involved and hooked up with a mentor or hooked up with somebody that's going to pair program with you or help you move along the path to becoming a better developer. They just want the cheap labor basically, and so that's, unfortunately, they're not really ready for your junior dev. They're just trying to get something out of you without necessarily caring about helping you in your career progression. They don't necessarily know what to expect when they hire you, because every dev's different, and you really kind of have to judge what someone can do and how they're going to benefit you on an individual basis, especially from a junior developer standpoint, because everyone's coming from maybe the same type of boot camp, but what they learned from that is going to be much different. Maybe it was their second time through and they've got a whole lot more experience now. I've had somebody who came to one of my classes that I taught, and it was her second time to go through a class, and she was much better at it. And as soon as she graduated, she was hired. So that wasn't because I'm a great teacher. It's because she had put in the work. And so she was kind of a level ahead of the others coming out of that boot camp. But you don't know, just because somebody graduates a boot camp, you don't know necessarily what they've done in the past and how their skill set is going to work. You have to evaluate that for every single person, and that takes time. And so a lot of employers just simply aren't ready to go through that process. And then a lot of times they're not ready because they just have these really high expectations of those junior developers that may not make sense. If they really understood junior developers, they may not have those expectations. So what can you do? So we're sitting here trying to figure out how we're going to tackle this problem, right? So just becoming a junior dev, it was hard. Now that you are a junior dev, getting a junior dev job is hard too. Maybe you're getting interviews, maybe you're not getting interviews, maybe you've got a job, but it's not necessarily one that you were hoping for. Maybe things are not working out as well as you had thought that it was going to. If you're in the process of looking for a job, here's what I would suggest. Learn as much as you can. Learn as much as you can about anything that's kind of related to the area that you're interested in. So if you're going into front-end development, learn as much as you can about HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Learn as much as you can about the main JavaScript frameworks like React and Vue and Angular. Pick one of those maybe and really dive deep into it. My preference would be Vue. That's what we use at the company that I work for. React, maybe. I've done Angular as well. But that would be my preference. React is really popular as well. But figure out what direction you want to go, and then just pour as much as you can into learning and using it in real projects, right? So that's kind of the next piece. Learn as much as you can, but get real world experience. And the reason for the real world experience isn't just for you to say, look at what a great developer I am, right? That's not the goal. The goal isn't to be like, look at all the great things that I've written. I've, got 47 to-do lists, applications that I wrote in these different languages and things like that. What we're really going for with developing real world applications is the ability to talk about what you've done in an interview. See, when you go into an interview, people want to know what your experience is, and if all you've done is walk through a bunch of tutorials and do build apps that are based on tutorials, that's not real world experience. Is it some experience? Yes. But if you can talk through, hey, I built an application to solve this problem in my life, and this is, the process that I went through with that, and this is what I wrote it in. And if you can talk through an actual project that's different than just these, simple ones that are done for tutorials, that's a huge bonus to an employer, because that tells them that you've taken another step. You've actually thought through the process of developing a project from start to finish. You've run into bugs, you've run into problems, you've dealt with them, and you can talk about how you've dealt with those different issues. So that's why you develop real world things and not just these little tutorial stuff. It's not just so you can have something to put on your GitHub list. It's so that you can talk about your experience and help them understand what you know and what you have done, what you've implemented. When I was a young developer, I didn't have really any training. Everything that I learned on my own, just looking at websites and documentation and things like that. But I could talk about what I did, because my first main project was building a big application, basically. So I could talk through that whole process, and I could talk about, the framework that I used, and I could talk about the challenges that we ran into, and all these different things. And so all the questions that they asked, I could answer with real world experience. And so that's very important that you not skip that part of the process. I would also suggest that you prioritize problem solving. So you want to show that you can take an issue and that you can walk through how you would solve that problem, and then maybe how you would solve that problem with code. What you would set up from a database standpoint, what some of your APIs would look like, what kind of UI you would design, things like that. So prioritize problem solving in that process. I would also say know your minimum requirements from like a salary standpoint before you go into the job interview. I have taken a job that paid me less than what I was making before, and it got me into the dev world, but it was not good. It was not good for our family. And so I would encourage you, don't go below your base. Know what your base is that you need. And if if an employer's not willing to give you that, then, that's probably not the employer for you, no matter how good the prospect seems. So know your minimum requirements and don't bend. And along with that, know the market. This was another thing that I didn't understand when I first got my first real job as a developer. I didn't know what I was worth. I knew the things that I knew, but I had no research and no idea the value that I brought to a company and the information that I had. And so I made severely less than I probably should have been making in my first corporate role, simply because I didn't know the market and I didn't know my value. There's lots of different places that you can go now and find what junior developers are earning. Glassdoor is the first thing that comes to my mind. There's other places like that online that you can look that information up, but go into those interviews with a knowledge of not just what you need, but where the market is, so that you don't get undercut. Because again, employers want as much as they can get for as little as they can pay, and that's just good business. That's not anything against them. Lastly, I would say have a plan to get mentored. No matter where you get a job, if they don't have a mentoring program internally, find an outlet for mentoring in your life, because you really need it. You're gonna need it to be successful at that job. You're gonna need it to be successful in your career, unless you're just willing to really take a very slow, long process like I did. It took me 7 years before I really started making good money as a software developer. And part of that's because I didn't know any better. And part of it's because I didn't know enough. I didn't know the things that I should have known to be able to make better money and have better roles. So those are some things that you can do to deal with the issue of getting a junior dev job. So is getting it hard? Yes, absolutely. Getting your first junior developer job is difficult, but it doesn't have to be terrible if you put together some of these things that we've talked about. All right, next. Working as a junior dev is hard. You're going to notice there's a pattern here. Everything is hard. All right, so working as a junior dev is hard. And the first reason why it's hard is that oftentimes junior devs get the task Groundhog Day. If you don't know what I mean by that, this is an old movie, so maybe this is dating me, but there's a movie called Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. And the idea is that he lives Groundhog Day over and over and over and over and over again. And you know, there's a long plot to it, but anyway, so he's doing the same things over and over and over, and he gets to the point where he's, you know, prognosticating. He's telling people, you know, what's going to happen, and it's you know, it's humorous, but unfortunately, junior developers can end up in that process in their first job, especially because they don't know what they don't know. They don't know what to expect in their first job. And so a lot of times what happens is the senior developers will give junior developers kind of the menial tasks, the simple things that they don't want to think about, that they don't want to do. And so that'll often be the same things from project to project. The same simple things could be something as basic as data entry, which is horrible. If you're a developer and you're getting stuck doing data entry, please talk to somebody so that you can get back to doing actual development work. It could be doing basic UI implementation, like building forms. You always get stuck building the forms, or you always get stuck building the landing pages, or you always get stuck with, you know, this certain type of work. Another part of this Groundhog Day tasking is kind of getting locked into a specific role. Excuse me. So when I got that first corporate job years ago, I had already built an application with a full stack application, front end, back end, and everything before I got that job. But I was specifically hired as a WordPress developer, and we had an architect who would introduce me to people, and he'd be like, "This is Dave. He's a WordPress developer, but he actually knows a lot more than that. But that's really all he does here." And it was kind of funny at first, but the more I grew in my other knowledge, the more annoying it became, because we had other teams doing other work, but I was just stuck doing WordPress work. And don't get me wrong, WordPress is great. I think it's a great way to start learning, especially backend code with PHP. And I still use WordPress for building simple websites and things like that. So I'm not against WordPress, but I am against being pigeonholed into one thing. And so that's something that you have to keep in the back of your mind as you're looking at your job, as you're working. Make sure that you're not getting, you know, task Groundhog Day to where you're just doing the same thing over and over. You're not being allowed to really grow in your experience and in your knowledge to make you a better developer. So the next one is, a lot of times as a junior developer, there are expectations put upon you, but not a lot of support. And what this looks like is you get a task. Usually they're tickets or tasks or something like that. So you're assigned a task, and there's a lot of assumptions that go into that task. And depending on who wrote the ticket, it could have lots of good information. It could have very little information. This is something as a lead developer that I've had to learn along the way, is how to write a good ticket for developers so that they don't have to come to me with questions and try to figure out what I'm intending. But especially as a junior developer, you're not going to have all that information. You're not going to even know necessarily what questions to ask right away. And even when you do ask questions, sometimes it's hard to get answers because other people are trying to get their work done. If there isn't a real mentoring process at the company you're working for, it can be really hard to get answers. And they're assuming that you are smart enough to understand what you need to do or to figure out where you need to go. And unfortunately, if you haven't been taught how to do that, you may not know. And so you'll be stuck just kind of spinning your wheels. Sometimes they're just not open to feedback. They're not open to hearing ideas for change. You might have a great idea to change maybe a dev process or something like that, or just asking to be moved off of WordPress, and try a different project. They don't always necessarily want to hear from you because you're just a junior developer. And along with that, comes the reality of this lack of mentoring. Right. So again, a lot of companies, I would say the vast majority of companies do not have any mentoring process in place for junior developers. It's just not something that they typically think about. They kind of just assume, I think, that the senior developer is going to help the junior developers, but then they keep a lot of expectations on those senior developers. And at the end of the day, junior developers end up kind of losing out on the mentoring side. So when you're working at a job, it's really hard to find a job that gives you mentoring. It's hard to find a job that gives you time to be mentored. It really is very rare. And so that's something that you need to understand when you go into a job, that you're most likely going to need to find mentoring outside of that job specifically. So the last thing that I want to talk about here is stress. And again, I have a video that I just posted last week, at the end of last week, talking about stress. So I won't talk about this a lot, but there's lots of things that cause stress for us as junior developers specifically. Really, it's for all developers, because we all kind of deal with this at different stages in our career, but especially for junior developers, it's an extremely stressful time. And that's due to several things. One is a lack of knowledge. So you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know things that you think that you should know. You don't know things that you were taught that you just don't remember. And it can be very frustrating to feel like you should be able to do this job or do this task, and it's just not coming back to you. You're just not able to do it. You don't seem to have the knowledge. And that can be very, very stressful. It can cause a lot of mental anxiety. And so that's one of the ways that you can be stressed out. Another is lack of speed. As a junior developer, you're just not going to be fast at creating a solution to your task. It's going to take you time to plot out the plan for fixing a bug, or plot out the plan for fulfilling a ticket. It's just going to take you time. And there may be other junior devs who start picking things up a little bit faster than you do. And so they're kind of moving a little bit faster. There's certainly the senior devs should be moving a lot faster than you are. And so there can feel this pressure, like you're not keeping up or you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And sometimes companies themselves will put that pressure on you, which is unfortunate, but that can cause a lot of stress as well. There's the lack of perceived progress. This kind of goes with that pace thing as well. If you don't feel like you're really making progress in your knowledge or even just on your project, if you're with your tickets, that creates a lot of stress, because again, you want to get things done. You want to get the ball rolling in your career and feel like you're achieving something. And if it doesn't feel like that's actually happening, then that can cause a lot of stress. And along with that is, quite frankly, in most of the industry, a lack of positive feedback. Most of the time when management wants to talk to you, it's not a good thing, right? They want to know what's taking so long. What's the problem? What are you running into? Let's fix something here. They don't necessarily always come to you with positive feedback and praise. And so that can be hard to spend hours and days and weeks and months grinding through this process and feeling all these other avenues of stress, and still at the end of that, not really feeling like somebody finds what you did valuable. And so these are some of the things that make working as a junior developer very difficult. So what can we do? Well, a few things. As you learn And as you experience more, whether that's on the job or that's outside of the job, you need to tell somebody about it. You need to tell somebody the things that you're doing. Show somebody the things that you're doing. Somebody who's above you, somebody who might be your direct report, somebody who could have some influence in whether or not you get onto another project, whether or not you get promoted in the future. You need to start documenting the things that you're doing, the things that you're learning, and actually show it and tell it to people so that they are aware. Hey, there's stuff going on. This person is this dev is learning things, and they're progressing forward. It also helps you to be reminded that you are progressing forward, right? So another thing you can do is ask for other projects and show interest in other projects. If there's other projects going on at your company, talk to the other devs, find out what they're doing, find out, that's what the water cooler is for, right? That's what the lunch table is for, is to talk to them, find out what they're doing, see what other languages and other frameworks and things that are being used at the company, and maybe start learning some of those skills so that you can move from those menial tasks to something that's more beneficial for the company, and in the end, better for you longevity wise. Clarify expectations before you start the job. First of all, what are they going to expect of you day one? And then what do they expect from a progress standpoint? But also when it comes to a task, when you get a task, don't just say, okay, I'll dive into this. Look at it, try to understand it, and then ask questions before you even start it so that you get as much information as you can before you start that task. And you can jump into that and be more successful right out of the gates. Again, find a mentor. I've said that you're going to hear that from me all the time, over and over and over and over again, because I truly believe that mentoring is the key to taking junior developers from that initial code learning phase to really being a valuable asset of a development team. And then lastly, I mentioned this on the stress video, but do something besides code. Find a hobby, find something else that you can do, that you can take your mind off of learning code, off of writing code, off of thinking about code, because that will just help with the whole stress issue. And again, I've got another video talking about that, so I won't go into that any further. All right, so we've talked about becoming a junior dev. We've talked about getting a job as a junior dev, working as a junior dev. Let's talk about advancing as a junior dev. So advancing as a junior dev is hard. Why? Well, the first thing is the issue of skills training. Again, most companies do not have a plan in place for you to increase your skills. They do not have a process. They might provide maybe some credentials to an account where you can learn things via video tutorials like Udemy or something like that, or Laracasts, or places like that. They might give you an account to one of those options, but they don't really have a specific goal necessarily of what they want you to learn. There's no dedicated training process, so it's not typically going to be something that a company is going to invest in for you. If you find a company that does, that is fantastic. Look very hard at whether or not you want to be a part of that, because if there's something else keeping you from it, I get it, but that's a huge thing for a company to invest in their developers, and it's actually very rare in the industry. The next thing is that there's often no promotions. That sounds bad, but promotions are very difficult to come by. In my experience, with other developers, it's kind of weird. In some companies, promotions are like almost standard. Like you move in this specific path in promotions, and it's kind of laid out in this time frame. But that's very, very rare, and it's definitely not specialized to what your goals may be. There's often not any career path figured out, and if there is a career path, it's often not even clearly explained to you. So without a career path, it's hard to know what skills you should be training on, and without a career path, it's hard to know what your promotion would entail, if there is even an opportunity for promotions. So not having a career path is a problem. Now, some places have a career path, but it may not be the career path that you want. For example, I worked at a company where, they would take really great devs and they would just kind of promote them almost without asking to a lead dev role. And not everybody wants to be a lead dev. Not everybody wants to deal with more of the management side of things. Not everybody has the skill set for that. And so they actually had really good developers leaving the company because they were kind of forcing them into this role because that was their decided upon career progression. So even if there is a career progression, there may be something that in that progression that really doesn't fit you. So you need to know what really fits you and what are you interested in, so that hey, is this something that I want to participate in? Is this a company that I want to put my time into? Unfortunately, again, there's often not a lot of feedback. So getting a promotion is difficult because you don't really know what the company thinks of you, because you're not really getting much feedback here. Most of the places that I've worked for did not have a regular one-on-one, which is just kind of a meeting with your direct supervisor. They did not have any way for you to know how you're doing. No real feedback. I worked at one place who had some key performance indicators, but they were just kind of like goals that you set up, and then we were never checked on them. So it was pretty much pointless, right? And unfortunately, that's the feedback that I get from a lot of devs, is that their companies, they may have a promotion process, but nobody really knows what it's like. Nobody really knows how it works. People just seemingly randomly get promoted. Maybe it's, when they ask for a raise. So sometimes program promotions lead you to something that you're not really interested in. So that's something to be aware of as well. Thirdly, pay raises. I hate to say this, but automatic pay raises are fairly rare in my experience. In fact, I have never worked at a company that automatically gave me a pay raise. I've talked to several other developers about this issue, and some of them do work at companies where they have a small percentage pay raise every year. It's minuscule, but when you're making good money, a small percentage is still a good chunk of money. But that's rare, and those companies typically are bigger companies that have lots of developers, have lots of high-end clients. They can afford to do that. They also tend to have a lot of turnover, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. But yeah, pay raises are a difficult part of this process. It's definitely a dark side of the career. They're not typically automatic, and generally you have to ask for a raise, which means you have to know what kind of raise you're looking for. And then you generally have to justify why you think you deserve that raise. So what is it that you have done either in building yourself up from a skill standpoint, or what have you done for the company that kind of makes it worth them investing more money in you? And unfortunately, the reality is that I would say, in my experience, the majority of junior developers that I've worked with ended up changing jobs in order to get a raise. Now, sometimes they would get, the current company would try to match, but at that point, it's really pretty much everybody tells you don't take a match, because if you're leaving, you're probably leaving for more than just the money, which, is generally probably good advice. But unfortunately, junior developers tend to leave a company in order to get a raise rather than getting a raise at a company that they're working for. It's just a reality. I think part of that's because they don't know how to argue for a better pay. And sometimes it's just easier to jump ship someplace else. So that's a little frustrating from an employer standpoint, obviously, especially if they do spend time interacting with you. But if they don't have a process in place for promoting and providing raises on a regular basis, that's also on them as well. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you either way whether you should do that or whether you shouldn't do that, but it is something that I see a lot of junior developers do, and quite frankly, a lot of senior developers do this as well. And that's just there's lots of reasons for it, but one of the realities is that pay raises are just they're difficult to come by in this industry. All right, so what are we going to do about these things? How can we handle these as junior developers and trying to advance our career? Well, the first thing I would say is prioritize and plan to gradually ramp up your skills outside of work. So you need to be advancing yourself outside of the work environment. You need to have a plan for it. Don't just spend all your time doing it, but have a plan to progressively learn new things and make yourself a better developer outside of the work environment, so that you have something that you can bring to them and show them, hey, I've put effort into myself, not just what I've done here at work, but I put effort in myself. So, I deserve a promotion, or it would be better for me to be in this position, or I deserve a raise based on the effort that I've put into myself to make me a better developer for this company. Right? So another part is determine what career path you want, and discuss with the company where that fits in. If you decide, I really want to be in project management, but I'm kind of taking this dev role so I understand development before I get there, be open with that with your company. Tell them that's where you want to be, because they may have a path for that. They may decide to create a path for that and have a way of helping you move along that path, because that sounds like something that they would be interested in as well. So have an idea of where you want to go. It's kind of the whole, where do you want to be in the next 5 years? Have an idea of where you want to go and make that clear, even in job interviews, but make that clear as you are trying to advance your career as well. If you get those one-on-ones, right? Document your goals that are reached and your skills learned and the ways that you've helped the company. So if you've completed 8 projects in a year, write those projects down. Write down the things that you did on those projects. If you're working on a team, write down the skills that you've learned. Keep documents of everything that you've done, because that is proof that you are helping the company move forward, and that's why you deserve a promotion or a raise. Ask for feedback from superiors. This is always very difficult. Nobody wants to get negative feedback, but sometimes negative feedback is better than no feedback. In fact, always negative feedback is better than no feedback, because if you're not asking them, if they're not telling you what you're doing wrong or what you're doing right, you need to be finding out from them what they really think about what you're doing, what they really think about how you have impacted the company. Because if they haven't thought about it, then they're probably going to ignore what you have to say about it, because they're just going to view you as a dev, right? As a junior dev. And so you need to have conversations with them at least once a year, probably at least once a quarter. And if you could get once a month, that's fabulous. If you could sit down with a lead or sit down with somebody even a little bit higher than that and just ask them what are some things that they see about you as a developer that you can grow in. What are some maybe things that you need to work on? What are some things that they're finding that you're doing well? If they're not offering that, ask them for it. Try to get that feedback from them. Learn about your company's raise structure, and if they have one, and if necessary, ask for it to be documented so that you have in writing what it is that they claim that they're going to do. If you don't do that, then you're just going to be shooting in the dark when you actually ask for a raise, which unfortunately, that happens a lot. A lot of companies will base certain raises on certain titles. So ask what those promotions look like in order to get the higher pay, and what the starting salary is for those higher pays. So know that information before you go into that process and before you start pursuing that. And then lastly, keep a finger on the pulse. Go to places like Glassdoor and others that do have, they're not perfect, but they do have a little bit of an idea of what junior developers are making, what junior developers with 2 years or 3 years of experience are making, what developers with 5 years and 7 years and 10 years. find out those numbers, and so you have a pulse, because that may help you get a little bit more than the company really wants to pay the base level for that next promotion. So it's good to have that information documented for you. All right, one more section. I know we've gone over the hour, but I just want to jump through this real quickly. And that is, keeping a job is hard. So we've gone through this whole process of the job, and now we're at keeping the job. And it's not even keeping a junior developer job. The reality is that keeping any development job is hard. And there are multiple reasons for that, right? Especially for junior developers, we have to understand that junior developers really are expendable. There's tons of junior developers and few roles for them. Again, we talked about how certain companies won't even hire junior developers. They're not ready for junior developers. There's lots of reasons why there are not junior developer roles. But that is a reality. There's lots of junior developers because we have all these boot camps and other trainings pushing junior developers out into the world, but there's a limited number of job openings for what they're training them. So it's a lot of times just a supply and demand issue. So if you have a job, if maybe you're not meeting specific expectations, you're expendable, so that's why you want to know what the expectations are before you get into it, so that you can make a plan to meet those expectations. It's a supply and demand business, and there's a lot of supply for junior devs, and not as much demand as there has been in the past. Secondly, junior devs are cheap. So turning over junior devs is not usually a difficult process, because it doesn't cost as much to turn over junior devs as it does to turn over senior devs. It takes longer to find senior devs. It takes more money to pay senior devs. So junior devs are expendable because they're cheap. Junior devs are expendable because they don't work on critical parts of projects. Like we mentioned before, you're working on a lot of times kind of the mundane aspects of the projects, the simple part of the projects. You're not being depended on to just take this whole thing and run with it normally in most situations. So that makes you largely expendable. And again, there's not a lot of money or time even necessarily wrapped up in a junior developer like there would be with somebody who's more integrated into projects that the company's building. So it's harsh, but the reality is junior developers are expendable. That's one of the reasons why my goal is to take you from learning code, being a junior developer, to launching a successful career in a fast way. I want to help you learn the things that you need to know so that you can take those steps quickly, so you can get out of the junior developer role and get into just a developer or senior developer role as quickly as possible. Because it's not just about how long you've been a developer, it's about what you know, it's about what you've experienced, it's about your confidence in doing these things. And so that's really the goal, is to get out of that junior developer phase where you are expendable into a regular developer or senior developer role where you're not as expendable. The next thing is that turnover is high. Keeping a job is hard because turnover is high in the industry. I saw a stat from 2021. So this was just a couple years ago. 2021, the Bureau of Labor Statistics for software development had a 57.3% turnover rate. That's almost a 60% turnover rate. That's really high. And that's for two different reasons. Obviously, that's companies letting people go. It's also developers leaving companies. We just talked about developers leaving for better pay at other companies, or for other reasons. Maybe there's problems with management, things like that. No job is perfect. For everybody. No job's perfect anyway, but not every place is perfect for everybody. But turnover is high. In fact, the average time spent by a developer at one employer is less than 2 years. I wish that I could say that I've experienced something different, but my experience actually falls right within that time frame. My first career with corporate position was 3 years, almost 3 years, and everything after that's been just under 2. And again, sometimes that was being laid off. Sometimes that was me leaving for a better option, better opportunity for myself and my family. So there's lots of reasons why that happens, but it's something that you need to be aware of, that the turnover is very high in our industry. And it may be because you choose it, and it may be because somebody else chooses it for you. And that's about 50-50, by the way. So that 60% turnover rate is about 50-50 letting go and leaving from devs. So turnover is high. And then thirdly, keeping a job is hard because you will lose a job. Now, are there companies where people are developers for 5-10 years? I've got a friend who's a developer at a company. He's been there for almost 20 years. That is really, really rare in today's market. It's very hard to find companies companies that are wanting you to be around that long, that are willing to pay you those increases over that period of time. And then, developers get bored sometimes doing the same things over and over again if the company doesn't provide other projects and things like that. So you are going to lose a job. Companies go under all the time. You might lose, you might not meet expectations. And so you might get let go because of that. Not necessarily because you're a bad dev, but maybe the expectations were too high. You might have a company that changes its focus. That was the excuse given to me at one of my companies. They were moving into a different type of software development, and so they didn't feel like that fit my skill set, and so they let me go. Whether that was true or not, I don't know, but that is something to consider, that the skills that you have may not translate with where the company is wanting to go at the time in that direction. So that's a reason why you might lose a job. Small companies and startups often hire junior devs because they're cheap and they don't have a lot of money. And unfortunately, small companies and startups go under all the time. They get financing sometimes, and they move forward for a bit, but eventually it catches up with them. And again, this is not all startups, not all small companies, but it's a reality of our industry that small companies and startups tend to fail. So if you get a job at one of those companies and they fail, you will lose your job. Established companies oftentimes will lose projects, or they'll lose clients that are big clients, and they'll have to let people go. I've been a contractor at a company that let over 50 contractors and some employees go because they lost one client. That's a big loss, and that happens in this industry. And so you're going to lose a job potentially because the company you work for loses a client and they just can't afford to keep you on staff. And big companies will just let people go because they need to cut costs. They're beholden to shareholders, and those shareholders want to make money. And if the company's not turning a profit, then they need to cut their losses with some of the employees. So it's very rare for somebody to get a job in this industry and have it for many, many years. More than likely, you're going to be about 2 years or less at most of the jobs that you're at. If you can be longer, be longer. If you can enjoy working for the same company, do it. That's what I would prefer. I'd rather stay at a company for 5-10 years and grow with that company. But unfortunately, it just isn't the real world that we live in from a career standpoint. So it's something that you need to be aware of. 99% of the time, you will lose a job. So how do we deal with that? How do we deal with these realities? These are probably the harshest realities of all of them. One thing you could do is just stop being a junior dev. You could just quit, say, I'm not going to be a dev anymore. That's one option. Or you can up your skills to where you're no longer a junior dev. You're a senior dev. And senior devs still get hit by some of those same issues. But they're often less likely to get hit than junior devs because they're not as expendable, right? Junior devs are expendable. Build your skills and seek to be an integral part of your company's dev team. Try to work yourself into different aspects of the company so that you are an integral part of the company so that when things happen, like they need to let somebody go, you're somebody that they depend on and they really can't let you go. Well, they can, but it would hurt. Another thing you can do or should do is keep your resume up to date. You know, you're supposed to be documenting all the things that you're learning and the things that you're doing to help the company. Keep your resume up to date with that information, not just for your raises, but in case you lose your job or need to leave that current position and go find something else. In case that happens, you're ready to go right out of the gate. So keep your resume fresh. Again, we're not talking about, just being anti your employer. Employers are great. It's just part of the job that there's probably going to be a time where you're going to lose your job. And it's not necessarily anybody's fault. It's just a reality of the world in which we live. And so you need to be prepared for when that happens. Along the same lines, save money. You've got to learn how to manage your finances so that you can save money back, so that you have money when you lose that job. You've got a safety net, because there's no guarantee how long it's going to take you to be out of a job. Again, the less experience you have, the harder it's going to be to find another job. Excuse me. Senior developers find jobs faster typically, but even then, I've had senior developers that I know that spent 3, 4, 6 months looking for a job. And that's a lot of bills and debt to rack up if you're not prepared financially. So knowing that there's a very good likelihood you're going to lose your job at some point, prepare yourself, not just mentally, but prepare yourself financially as well. Thirdly, be a great teammate. Not thirdly, but be a great teammate, but don't get attached. The first time I was let go, it was hard. It hurt a lot. I had developed a lot of relationships with people, and it was tough. It was tough to say goodbye, because you feel like you've given a lot to that company. You feel like you've put everything into your job, and then it's just gone. And it hurt. And I cried. It was rough. It was real rough, because you don't know where to go from there. And so it's emotionally going to be hard. And again, what I say is true. Don't get attached, but do be a good teammate. You need to be a good teammate. You need to build relationships to some level, but realize that those relationships are probably going to be severed at some point. It's just the reality, and we need to go into those relationships with that understanding. So be a great teammate, but realize that you can't get attached. I do have some friends that I've worked with that we still remain friends. We still communicate with one another. I've got one developer friend who I've actually worked at multiple companies with him. It's just because this is a small dev community here in the Kansas City area, and that's fun when that happens, but that's generally pretty rare. Those relationships are going to get severed when the job is severed. So you want to be able to walk away having been a good teammate, but not necessarily having your heart ripped out because you knew it was probably going to happen at some point. Lastly, never, 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 ever burn a bridge. Again, it hurts when you get let go. There may be reasons outside of finances why you might leave a job. Maybe it's an interpersonal issue or something like that. So it's not necessarily always good when you're moving on. But never put yourself in a position where you've burned a bridge with the company that you're currently working for, that you're leaving, or that's letting you go. In most places, the development community is actually pretty small. There's not 1,000 jobs in one area, or 1,000 companies in one area doing development work. And so the number of companies that are available for you to potentially work for is very limited. And so you need to make sure you don't burn any bridges, because they talk to each other. People, you might see a resume come across your desk and somebody else has worked with you at a different job, and they might say, yeah, he was a good developer or she was a good developer, but man, they left a huge mess, or they walked off and stormed off and it was not good. I mean, the way that you leave, the way that you handle being let go can really make or break your career at other places as well. So never, ever, ever, ever burn a bridge when it comes to leaving or being let go from an employer. So anyway, that's a lot of information. I know we've gone way over an hour and I apologize for that. I will take this and edit it down and kind of slice it up into several videos to make it a little bit easier to go through for others in the future. I didn't see any questions come through, so we don't need to worry about any of those. But hopefully you found this helpful. Hopefully you have a better understanding of kind of the dark side of a software development career, some of the things to watch out for, some of the things to just realize they're probably going to happen, and you can plan for them. You can be ready for these things to happen in your career. And because thank you, G.I. Joe, you have an answer, you have a way forward, and you can be successful in spite of these things that are kind of, cold and dark aspects of the development world, specifically the junior development career path. So hopefully this has been a help to you. If you found it helpful, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, if you wouldn't mind sharing it to other people who might also find it helpful. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you'll be notified when I do maybe slice this up and put these up as separate videos or add other videos in the future, or even just be reminded about our live stream every Monday at 7 p.m. So again, I'd love to have you live on the stream, asking questions, and I'd love to interact with you more than just me sitting here talking for an hour or an hour and a half as it was tonight almost. So I hope this was helpful to you. And I hope you're not afraid of the dark side of the development career, but I hope you're excited and empowered to be able to move forward and be successful in it. So have a great evening, and we'll see you all here next Monday at 7 p.m. And I'll put out a post probably on LinkedIn once we decide on what the topic's going to be for next Monday. If you ever have a specific topic that you'd like me to discuss, please send me an email, info@devmentordave.com. We're still working on the website. That's going to be coming out in the days ahead. But the email address is live, info@devmentordave.com. Also, feel free to leave a comment on this video or other videos if there's a topic you'd like me to cover. Or you can hit me up on LinkedIn. There's a Dev Mentor Dave page. Or you can just find me, David Welch, on LinkedIn as well. So hopefully this has been a help. Have a great evening, and we'll see you next Monday.